Hold on. Yeah, they are an iambic pentameter. I just wanted to check before we got any further.
No.
I was like, how many lines were they? Hi, my name is Melodie Roschman, and I'm the Communications Officer for Media in the Faculty of Mathematics. So I originally joined the Key Clues team last year to work on the theme and narrative. If you played last year, you may remember that you received a series of mysterious messages from the Watcher. That was me. I got to walk the entire campus and take note of details and write these stories, and that was the main role I played on Key Clues. But around halfway through puzzle testing, Sarah Chan approached me with a puzzle that she was working on and was hoping that I could help her kind of take it to the next level. She had developed a really clever system in which Shakespeare characters would be placed on a grid along the X and Y axis based on the act and scene in which they died in their respective Shakespeare plays. And in the original version of the puzzle, she just had tombstones with the characters' names on them, but she worried that this was too simple. You know, you look up the characters, you find out where they die, you place them, that's basically the whole puzzle. She came up to me with the idea that I could write an epitaph for them for the tombstone, something like, I was poisoned. Now the thing you have to know about me is that before I came to the University of Waterloo, I did a PhD in English literature, and I really love Shakespeare. I've seen tons of Shakespeare plays, shout out Stratford Festival, where I go to see a play at least once a summer. And I said, well, we could just write those, or I could give you a rhymed couplet in iambic pentameter, because all of Shakespeare's plays are written in iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter refers to a line that is 10 syllables long, pente meaning 5 sections, and iambic is an unstressed, stressed cadence. So ba-ba, ba-ba, ba-ba. And all of Shakespeare's work is written in the iambic pentameter because it's like a slightly more stylized version of the way that speech naturally flows in English. So I thought this would be, you know, kind of an Easter egg, kind of a clue to the reader that these are Shakespeare characters because it's all in iambic pentameter. But then I sat down. This was not like a very technical process. I looked up all the characters. Some of them I already was familiar with. Some of them I had to double check. Young Seward, for example, is a very minor character compared to someone like Macbeth's wife, Lady Macbeth. And I worked backwards. I had to double check and make sure that I was describing the character in enough specific detail that they couldn't be confused with another character. This is actually something in the testing process we ran into a couple times where my clues were too ambiguous and I had to rewrite them. And it was really about striking a balance between giving the audience obvious clues and not being so obvious that they could just like immediately Google this and solve it or throw it in ChatGPT or whatever. So I came up with a set of couplets for each of these characters and we put those on the tombstones instead. And so this way, you would have to figure out who the character was, and then once you figured out who the character was, you would figure out when they died, and then from there you'd solve the puzzle. So I'm going to walk you through the puzzle I co-wrote with Sarah Chan called Tragedies. It's a really simple puzzle. It's only one sheet of paper, and you've got a title, you have a bunch of tombstones, 12 in total, with all of these 2-line kind of poems on them. And then we have this grid on the bottom that looks kind of like a crossword puzzle grid, just like it's got arrows, it's got some dark spaces. Clearly we're supposed to fill something in here, but we're not exactly sure what. The first thing I'm gonna do if I am looking at this puzzle is I am going to look at the title, Tragedies. And that can make me think of a lot of things. It can make me think of sad things happening in real life. Clearly there's tombstones, people have died. But if I, am thinking about tragedies as a genre, I might think, for example, about tragic plays. In the early modern period, often plays were divided into 3 categories: comedies, tragedies, and histories. So that's something I might keep in mind. There's The Duchess of Malfi by Webster. It might be by Marlowe. It's been a while since I took Renaissance literature. But anyway, so we've got 12 tombstones and all of them seem to be very similar. Some of them have different shapes. So I think, that might be significant later. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read what's on the tombstones. So this one, for example, says, I don't think that's how princes should behave. I gathered herbs, but water was my grave. So we're getting the sense that each of these tombstones has a rhymed pair of lines, what we would call a rhymed couplet. in poetic form that is from the perspective of someone who has died. I pick up a couple context clues from these that these might refer to plays I've heard of, right? For example, I've seen Hamlet several times, and I know that Ophelia famously drowns after gathering a bunch of flowers and handing them out to people, and that she is in love with Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. So I think, I don't think that's how princes should behave. I gathered herbs, but water was my grave. So I'm gonna write a grid here just so I have a good set of things for myself to keep track of. And I'm gonna say that I think this is Ophelia. Let's see. The man who would be Pharaoh was my friend. He chose the queen, and so I chose my end. Well, I know that the Shakespeare play that has a pharaoh and a queen in it is either Julius Caesar or Antony and Cleopatra, but it's probably Antony and Cleopatra since it mentions pharaoh specifically, and Julius Caesar doesn't really deal with Cleopatra at all. But I'm not that familiar with the play, so I'm just gonna write down A and C, and then I'm gonna keep going. Identity, it's theft, Jim, 'tis no joke. A writer's heart absorbs the killing stroke. So I just threw in a reference to The Office here because I thought it would be funny. One of my favorite moments in The Office is, of course, when Jim dresses up as Dwight and says,
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
I did not realize this was going to throw a lot of people off because people were like, yes, Shakespeare, 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 The Office. So a lot of people thought that this specific tombstone and none of the others referred to The Office. I was just being cute. So this is an example, clearly, somewhere in a Shakespearean tragedy where someone is mistaken for someone else and they're a writer and then they die. So, I'm thinking about that. I might have to do some reading about different Shakespeare plays. Advice for you, don't eavesdrop on the queen, or you might find a sword blade through your spleen. So this is another one I know. I've seen Hamlet, and I know that Polonius is eavesdropping on the queen while she's talking to Hamlet, and he gets stabbed through a curtain with a sword, and so I know that's Polonius. And now this is actually really helpful that I have found this out because you'll notice, because I've seen Hamlet, and I know that these are Ophelia and Polonius, and you'll notice that these have the same tombstone shape. So that's actually going to really help me out if I can't figure out an individual character, because if I can solve a character from a play, that's probably telling me that the other matching tombstones will be from the same play, which really narrows it down for me if I'm not a Shakespeare scholar, right? So anyway, you would proceed this way, solving all of these couplets, and eventually you're going to end up with a list of all 12 characters. So I have now solved all the riddles, and I have figured out not only what character each epitaph refers to, but also what play they're from. So Ophelia from Hamlet, Cinna from Julius Caesar. Fun fact, he is the namesake of Cinna from The Hunger Games. Polonius also from Hamlet, and see these two match. So that can kind of help me make sure I'm on the right track, is that, for example, with Mercutio and Juliet, they both die in Romeo and Juliet, and sure enough, their tombstones match. That's kind of a way that I can figure out that I have made the right guesses on who these characters are. So once I've figured out all of the characters and all the plays they're from, I still don't really know how to fill out this grid. And so I'm thinking about what else do I know about these characters, right? What do they all have in common? And this is again a case where having done a Shakespeare play in school will help you out, because if you've read any Shakespeare play in school, you know that these plays are all divided into acts and scenes. Basically, every Shakespeare play has 5 acts, and then these acts are subdivided into scenes. And so I'm like, okay, I know that, but what am I supposed to do with that information? Well, looking at this crossword puzzle looking situation right here, we can figure out that it looks not quite symmetrical. There's a thicker line on the left and a thicker line on the right. And this is where your high school English class is not going to help you. You need to think back to grade 11 reasoning with functions. Because in grade 11 reasoning with functions, you had to plot things on a grid using an x-axis and a y-axis. And so I'm thinking, okay, if I have a act number and a scene number, and I have an x-axis and a y-axis, maybe I can use that to plot these characters. So I know that these plays all have act numbers and scene numbers, and I'm thinking, well, these are tombstones, they're describing how they died. It probably would make sense to go and find where they died in the text. For example, I am pretty familiar with Romeo and Juliet, so I'm gonna go to the scene in Romeo and Juliet when Mercutio dies. right? Which is also helpful because in this couplet it says, Queen Mab and I are closest you can be, a pox on both your homes for killing me. And famously, Mercutio's last line when he dies is a pox on both your houses. So I'm gonna go and look up what that is. I looked up where in Romeo and Juliet Mercutio dies, and I found out that he dies in Act 3, Scene 1. So I'm gonna write 3-1 right there. And then I'm gonna repeat that information for all of the characters. So great news, everything fit. And now what do I do with it? I could try reading it, across. Arbus is halted, like it's nonsense, right? I could try taking a line from the top of each thing, A, P, like there's just nothing that really pops out to me. But I did notice when I was filling it in that the letters or the grid point didn't always correspond to the beginning of someone's name, which makes me think, maybe I can use those again. So I think that it might be reasonable to use my act and scene numbers again, since I still have these coordinates and they don't directly correspond to the beginning of people's names. So for example, Ophelia is 4-7. So I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there's a P, so I'm gonna circle a P. And Obarbus is 4-9, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Cinna is 3-3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I'm gonna keep doing those in order until eventually, and that gives me poison carrot. Now, there is no poison carrot I know of in Shakespeare. It would probably not be a bad idea at this point to try typing in poison carrot into the answer checker. But if I do that, it's gonna say I'm wrong. So I'm thinking, okay, poison carrot is a final clue that's trying to tell me something. And this is when it's helpful to remember what the theme of the puzzle was, right? This is about Shakespearean tragedies and the ways people die. So I'm thinking, okay, what is a poison carrot? What does that stand for? How might that relate to a way someone dies in Shakespeare? And this is one of those places where it's helpful to know a lot about Shakespeare, because Shakespeare loves poisoning deaths. People are always getting poisoned in Shakespeare, but you don't have to know it. I can just Google poison carrot. And if I Google poison carrot, I'll find out that poison carrot is another word for hemlock, which is a form of poison that is used frequently in Shakespeare. So let's try hemlock. And sure enough, hemlock is the answer to the puzzle. That's how you solve tragedies. I really loved working on this puzzle, and I hope that you enjoy solving our next round of puzzles as much as I liked making this.